This
Envision.
conference will now be
Oh,
recorded.
all right, so we're getting recorded now. So I'll tell you what. Let me first of all, you know, Emily, can you put on the next slide here? So a little bit about myself. 4 years ago, I started Relentless Recruiting. So if this picture was taken 4 years ago, it'd just be me. And I was very fortunate that I found some entrepreneurs that saw my vision, and we put this team together. And so we're basically focused on human capital in medical companies. And we do medical sales to IT and software. And then we got into contract staffing, even contract sales. So it's exciting that, as an entrepreneur, you kind of first ask yourself, what do I have to lose? And then after a few months or a few years, you realize, how big can I get this? And it's exciting. And I'm a member of an organization called Bio, where I got an invitation about 8 months ago about Stephanie's first course that she was hosting about entrepreneurs and dealing with startups. So I signed up, and she's probably not going to tell you this, but I was probably the class valedictorian of that course.
I didn't know
No,
we had one.
yeah, exactly. No, it was awesome, and I basically realized how fragmented the medical industry is, especially with startups. Trying to get everybody together is the hard part, and I think that's exactly what's behind Stephanie setting up this platform. And I just want to get the word out. I have no financial obligations with Stephanie or her course, but I want to bring value to the circle of my clients and potential clients, that she is a person that, what's the saying? It's not what you know, but who you know. Well, she has both bases covered on that. So next slide, Emily. So here's the formal introduction of Stephanie. I know some of y'all have already spoken to her, but she is the managing director of the entrepreneurship program and the manager director at the University of California, San Francisco. She has 30 years in life science and healthcare space. She's held many C-level jobs at those companies. She's a startup advisor and a mentor. She also teaches globally for the U.S. State Department, and she holds a MBA from Wharton and a master's from Columbia. And so, needless to say, she is a subject matter expert, as you're about to find out. And so, welcome, Stephanie. I really appreciate you taking a little time and kind of for us to pick your brain, first of all, and then give you an opportunity to kind of talk about what you have going on in the Bay Area.
That sounds perfect, Kelly. Thank you for the opportunity to do this. I just want to point out that that picture was pre-COVID. I don't look anything as happy as that now.
So, well, first of all, and I received a bunch of questions. I told you that yesterday, Stephanie. So, what I'm just for sake of time, I'm going to start firing away some questions. And if you have questions, there is a chat bar. If not, at the end of this, I'll send you contact information for Stephanie. You can link them with her on LinkedIn because there's no way we can handle all these questions. However, the good news is a lot of y'all have the same type of questions. So hopefully we'll get more bang for our buck. So first of all, Stephanie, you've been in the space. Can you kind of just tell us a little bit about your journey from throughout the years and how things have changed and so forth?
Sure. Well, I didn't start anything like this. I went straight into the business world, private sector, and spent all my career there, except for a brief experiment in state government where I did policy, and then now at UCSF. So my approach to the world is private sector. But I've been at UCSF now for, going back to that, I did some tech and then I did life science, and I got into life science when it was really exciting in Boston in like the early 90s. And it was where all the action was. So that's what attracted me to the business. And then I took a number of sort of business development kinds of positions. And at one point I did marketing to Wall Street because I was with a company, Vertex Pharmaceuticals, that had just gone public and they needed to deal with the street. Then I ended up taking over some companies for venture capital because they had been messed up and they needed someone to go fix them, and on and on and on. So lots of different experiences and ties to MIT and Harvard, mainly when I was in Boston, and then I moved out here and got close to Berkeley and ultimately joined UCSF. So I think one of the questions is what's different? I've been doing this startup very early space now for 9 years. And it has evolved, and especially in the Valley, which is my main point of reference, people have become a lot more sophisticated. The expectations are a lot higher. This is for venture capital, for investors in general. It used to be that to go into venture capital, you just needed an MBA. And now they don't really hire very many MBAs. They're all PhDs and MDs or PhD MDs. So they've really built a lot of expertise on the science side of our businesses. And there's some trends out here where there's crossover investing from some of the big tech investors. And so that they're bringing in life science people to build that out. But basically everyone's just stepped up their game a lot.
Gotcha. So one of the main questions I kept seeing is kind of the main reasons why you think startup companies thrive or fail.
Yeah, it's a pretty obvious list to people who do what I do. It's not about the technology, and I know that must sound strange to those of you who are focused on the technology side of things, but generally, and there are some exceptions in life science, of course, generally things can sort of work out in one way or another, but it's about misreading what the need is. So it's the market, it's understanding the market. And if you build something that nobody really wants, as in they say, gee, that would be great, and then you say, would you pay for it? And they say, where's the payback for me? Then you're not meeting a real need and you don't have a payer. And so many companies don't understand that, and they say, look, I've got this great widget and it's just so much better and the patients will love it, or we can deliver better healthcare, but that's not where it all sits. So that's number one, misreading the market. Product market fit is the technical term for it. Another is the team. So I was just reading some stats the other day that the team is the major problem in startups, that it's the wrong team, or the team is dysfunctional, or there are just team issues. And if that doesn't work, you don't have anything. And things never go the way you plan them to in a life science startup. So who's going to figure out what to do next? It's not the investor, it's the team. And if you don't have a good team, you're not going to be able to handle the difficult times. So that's number two. And then the market opportunity. So it needs to be big enough to justify the kind of investment that needs to go into a life science company. So this isn't tech where you can sit in your dorm room at Stanford with a couple of friends and build something that becomes Facebook. This is a business that requires a lot of capital, and you're not going to get that capital unless there's a big market opportunity. Sure. So 3 things: market opportunity, product market fit, and team are my top 3.
Gotcha. Well, you had Caleb Bell as one of the mentors that came in, and he said his analogy, which I want to share. He goes, every company has to go down 3 different roads. And the first road is a jungle road where you got your machetes out and you're cutting down trees and pushing your Range Rover through the marsh and everything else. And then the second road is the muddy dirt road that you're going faster, but you have to jump out and push your car out every once in a while. And then the third road is a paved road where you're going 80 miles an hour and you have a flat tire and you call AAA to come fix you and you're off on your way. He goes, his biggest mistake about team was he was hiring the paved road person for the machete job, or he's hiring the machete person for the paved road. And he goes, like, so somebody shows up to the jungle and wearing a suit. I probably did not explain how hard a startup is, and not to say they couldn't do it, but I see that as a recruiter every day, is people wanting something that they think, but they misread exactly what they need in that point in time with their company.
I've got a great story to add to yours, which is I was working for a company in Boston, and we were pretty shaky financially, and we were really struggling to get our first program have real traction. And for some reason, the board decided that the founder, CEO, who was a scientist, was the wrong guy, and that they were going to bring in a big name. So they brought in a guy from Merck who ran Canada. And so this guy showed up, and you know, I don't know what happened in the early days, but after he'd been there for a little while, he spent most of his time renovating his new condo in Beacon Hill. He used to come to work in a limo, when he was in Canada, and he had to deal with this, sort of rangy group of scientists who were trying to make something happen, and the fact that we were running out of money. And he just couldn't deal with it. It just wasn't his mindset. He was a big company guy, and he wasn't ready to roll up his sleeves and become part of the team. So just to your point, Kelly, it's well taken.
Yeah, great. And just so everybody knows, pretty much, Stephanie, and maybe talk about the backgrounds of the people on your last class, and then I know they were all over the world, but just to kind of give a flavor of who's basically an entrepreneur and where are they coming from.
So do you want me to talk about the class as entrepreneurs, or in general what backgrounds I see?
The general backgrounds, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. So, entrepreneurship, they say it's a disease. And it sort of is, because, if it's your calling, you sort of can't stop doing it. And it's in your DNA. So it's not about, I guess a statistic that would be useful is that 51% of the CEOs in Silicon Valley are immigrants. So why is that? Well, what is it about an immigrant? It's somebody who had to really move out of their comfort zone and move to a new country and try to adapt to it and be flexible and be ambitious enough to make things work when it wasn't easy. And it turns out immigrants are really great at doing startups for that reason. So it's really a personality type. Sure, you can find, and it's common in our business to find PhDs from, name a top university, and MDs and so on, and that's helpful, but it's not the personality set that's going to make you successful as an entrepreneur necessarily. You have to be different. You have to flout authority. You have to make things happen when nobody's there to help you and you don't have any money. You have to be persistent, and you have to work on a different time frame, which you never see in academia. Academia's nice and slow, and if you're in a startup, and especially if you've taken anyone else's money, you've got to run. So it's a whole number of different personalities, characteristics that are the DNA of an entrepreneur. And it's really, people come from all of, I always ask the question, what did your parents do when I meet an entrepreneur? Because there is a correlation. If you grew up, one of my favorite entrepreneurs, who's now gotten funded for a CAR T company from some big investor names. He grew up in Alaska, where his father was a bush pilot, and he got a PhD at UCSF, and was living that life and the postdoc life. But his dinner table conversations as he was a kid were about finance, marketing, running a business. And that was just inside him. And plus his father created this business, which was quite successful. So that's why I always say, what did your parents do?
Yep, great. Now here's a question that was probably asked, definitely more than 3 or 4 times is, how do you find, if you're a startup CEO, how do you find funding?
Well, that's a big question, and it's not an easy question. So, the one thing I have to put out there right away is don't think venture capital. Everyone says, I still remember when I had only been at UCSF for a little while, some big name cardiologist wanted to talk to me about starting a company around his science. So I went over to have lunch with him, and he just had a few experiments, nothing I would call a real proof of concept. And he said, I want to raise $30 million from venture capital. How can you help me? And I said, I can't. It's not going to happen. It's not what they look for. So you have to understand there are different classes of investors. And if you're doing a raw startup, venture capital is off the table. They're really, with a few notable exceptions, which is VCs who want to create the company themselves and basically, if not kick you out, put you in a minor role. For the most part, VCs want something with a team, with a proof of concept and some traction. So that's not where you go. You go first for grants from the government, Small Business Innovation Research grants. If it's appropriate, this doesn't apply to digital health so much, but it certainly applies to therapeutics, diagnostics, and medical devices. That's a great source. It's non-dilutive, which means they don't take any stock, no equity. It's just the government contribution to get something to happen. There are angel investors who will invest early, but they are also, at least in our network in Silicon Valley, they're becoming a lot more demanding. They act a lot like VCs often. They want a lot of proof before they go in, so it's not true risk capital. And then there are a number of other sources that are much harder to dig out, like foundations, that, for instance, a disease foundation, if you're working on cystic fibrosis, they actually put equity into companies or funding. I guess they're getting a return. There are family foundations, which are very wealthy families who create an entity through which they can invest. And they often have family members who have some disease state and they're on the search for something that might address that. And on and on. So that's sort of the very quick summary of where do you start. And I would start with government grants and angels. Those are the main places to look.
You just reminded me, during the course, they said the 3 Fs.
Friends, families, and fools.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, sure, you can start, you can max out your credit card and you can go to your friends and family. And it's a way people get started. Thank you for reminding me to mention that, Kelly. But it's also problematic. So just think about it. How many family members who just, like you, they believe in you, they know you're smart, they know you, went to a good school and you've done well. And so you come to them and you say, I'm doing a startup, Uncle George, would you consider putting $25,000 into it? And, they'll probably say yes. But what they don't know is how hard it is to do a startup and the things that money is completely at risk. They may never see it again. And if you have to face them at Thanksgiving next year and say, hey, Uncle George, things didn't go quite the way we expected, and we're going to have to shut it down, or if you have another 50,000, we can try keep going and fix some of these problems. That doesn't always go over so well with the family. So it's a good reason to not have to use that friends the same, unless they're really savvy investors. So, in Silicon Valley, you can go to friends and they know the game and they know that their money is at 100% risk. And if they say, that's okay, Stephanie, I'm willing to take a shot on you because I believe in you, but I get it, 90% of startups fail. and that could happen, but it's worth it to me. That's a different story than Uncle George, who's a dentist or whatever, something not related to our business, who ends up putting money in.
Well, I noticed during your course last fall, there were some CEOs looking for help, i.e., other people to bring on. And this is actually just a question I just thought of: is there a place besides, obviously your course is great for that people are able to network, but if somebody like Craig kind of mentioned earlier, he's trying to find another opportunity to maybe lead a leadership role at the startup, is there any recommendations? Is there a meeting or anything like where a lot of people from incubators might go and they're looking to launch, or somewhere where somebody can kind of migrate to and rub elbows with people that might need somebody like themselves?
Yeah, great question. And after I answer it, let me come back to the course, because we mentioned it a few times, but we haven't really framed it. So yeah, the network is everything, and it's really hard under COVID, but let's talk about post-COVID, which hopefully is going to happen one of these days. I used to go out maybe 3 nights a week to events of some sort, and I'm in a great ecosystem, obviously, so it's easy to find things to go to. And sometimes the events are really interesting, sometimes so-so, but I was always there to see who I could meet. And so I've built up a big Rolodex because of that. And so there's no one place to tell you to go, but you should be looking at everything going on in your local ecosystem where you could possibly meet somebody who would be the right connection, and you just don't know. It's not necessarily productive time. You can go to things for weeks and never meet anybody, but for the most part, if you're in the right ecosystem, someone will show up in ways you haven't anticipated and maybe provide something you weren't exactly looking for, but is super useful, or that leads to something else. So that's the way to do it. It's networking. Find groups where there might be the right people, and go to them and get to know people and build your network.
Sure.
And yeah.
Well, and then let's talk about your course now. And what was the idea behind it? Where do you see it in a couple, 3 years? And just kind of give everybody a flavor of what you're up to.
Sure. So this is a global online entrepreneurship course focused on life science and medical startups. And the theme is direct from Silicon Valley. I'm wondering if I should even pull up, I have a few slides, but I can't see screen. Should I screen share? Should I do that now, Kelly, or would you want me to wait?
That's fine. Yeah, no, go ahead.
It just might be a little easier to talk through it. So to share it, I asked the organizer to make me the presenter. Did I do that?
You are.
I'm the presenter, okay, but all it says is go to meetings. So let me see how I can pull these up, okay? And I want to go to
slideshow.
Yeah, slideshow at the top, great. So this course, can you see? All right, you should be able to see it now from the beginning. Yeah. No, I don't want to leave the meeting. No, I'm just trying to be able to see my own slides. Okay, anyway, this course started as something that we teach called customer discovery. And I didn't know if I was sitting at home in March, April, when COVID hit, and I realized this was going to be a long haul, and I wasn't going to be able to do business as usual at UCSF. So I thought about, well, what could I do? Could I create something that I could do online? And as long as I was going to be online, why didn't I go global? Because there's no restriction. So that was my concept. And I did 24 interviews around the world, sort of testing my idea. And they came out very positive, and people gave me ideas to build on my idea. So again, this is something we teach in the class. So how do I advance this is the question. I'm doing my arrows. Okay, so here it is. This is this class after doing my customer discovery interviews, making up a brochure that was not a real brochure, but it sounded like it was real. said, we're doing this great course and here are all these speakers from Silicon Valley and you're gonna learn about how to do a startup in the life science space. I put it out there, and at the end of the day, I had 113 people who signed up from 4 different continents and 13 countries, which was a great start. So here's some of them on screen. And then some of the reasons people were taking this was they were either thinking about a startup or already doing it. One famous quote I got was, wow, I wish I'd taken this course before I did the startup. Some of them were just curious about Silicon Valley, or they wanted to understand early stage ventures for whatever reason, interest in building a global network, and then just generally tapping into the kind of innovation we see out here. So who took it? This is who should take it, is really who took it. And you can see, I'm not going to read this list, but you can see it was quite a diverse group of people. It was really interesting to see how they found us and what they wanted. But it turned out to be a great network, and they really appreciated the network piece of it. And the objective is to first figure out if your idea is a commercial opportunity. And then, what do you have to put together in a business plan, which isn't a big written document anymore. It's basically a slide set. And then learn what investors want to see to be interested in investing. So the format, it was so successful, and Kelly, okay, we'll make you the valedictorian, Kelly, whatever.
Thank you.
Kelly was, actually was a great participant, and it did so well that we decided we're going to do another one this spring. So it starts on March 31. And the lectures are all by these Silicon Valley practitioners. So people, it's not an academic theoretical course at all. It's very practical. It's like, here's what you need to know about investment, about regulation, about whatever. It's both live online, and also everything's recorded. So if it's not at a convenient time for you, you can watch it whenever it is convenient. And in addition to the class, we have ways to interact and engage. So peer forums in which some of my wonderful mentors have participated, and then topical study groups that we formed around a topic. And these are sort of the content of the class, and these are all absolutely key learnings for any life science or medical startup. And then I sprinkle in some stories from entrepreneurs who've come out of my program at UCSF and have jumped into starting a company right away. So just sort of a great overview of the field. And these are the kinds of lectures we have, from all different parts of the ecosystem, whether investing or an IP attorney, and doing partnerships with pharmaceutical companies or digital health, regulatory, health insurance, and so on. The mentors have a very, very varied background. So you can sort of find people who can address most issues that you might be curious about. And they really played a great role in jumping into these peer forums and leading discussions, and a lot of great value there. And that's it. We're signing up people now, the price discount until the end of the month. And that's me, and that's my contact information. And I can stop sharing my screen if I could figure out how to do that.
Now, Stephanie, I want to point out to the audience is you usually have an hour course, and then what's really neat is these mentors that she brings in. There's actually a different section that you can actually get on, like a group. And if you're in medical device, or if you're in biotech pharma, or if you're in diagnostics, she breaks up the mentors so you can go to different groups. And if there's a venture capitalist, you want, back to Craig's question, that he'll have the opportunity to ask all kinds of questions and to these mentors. And that's what I thought was really beneficial, is just the ability to get in front of the right people and learn.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that from a student point of view. I don't know how to clear my screen back, frankly. So if someone wants to give me instructions, someone more tech savvy than I am, I keep on hitting something that says leave the meeting. So how do I get out of sharing my screen?
Oh, I don't know. Emily?
All right. I'll just keep talking and hope
All right.
everyone can ignore it.
No worries.
So yeah, you know, I've known these mentors for a long time, and usually we used to do team-based classes, and we'd assign a mentor to each team, and they'd go away with the team, and I wouldn't really see them again. So I didn't know how good they were. And when I put them into these forums, and then I went to every forum myself, I was like, oh my God, that is so valuable, that information. So I was really pleased by what they could do. And
So is that the reason why you did this course? Did you see that the medical industry is really fragmented? Like everybody knows what they know, but putting the whole puzzle together is a challenge?
well, you know, that's a great outcome of some of the people we had in the class. But I didn't go in with any lofty reasons for that. I just went in saying, we're in lockdown and I want to be able to pull people together and keep doing what I love doing, which is teaching. But we certainly saw from, you know, a story I love is we had a health policy person from Washington, and she wrote some of the policy on electronic medical records like 10 years ago, but she had never spoken to a clinician. And then in this class, we had a number of clinicians, and she connected with one, and she said, oh my God, I wish I'd known this stuff when I was writing the rules for this. And I wish she had too, because, you know, just think about it. So yeah, there are interesting combinations. I know you found some, Kelly, people you might not have had a chance to meet, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, and you know, I also was struck by how the class valued the network. And you know, we had a clinician in Pakistan, and we had an investor in Korea. We had tech transfer in Scotland. We had entrepreneurs all over the place. We had national laboratory people in the U.S. and a clinician and in a medical school in West Virginia. I mean, it's just so diverse, and people kept wanting more and more interaction. And so then we built in some new things, which I'm going to do from the start this time. We are going to have study groups from day one and keep going on all those forums.
Sure. Now back to, I know Craig was early on, he had a question about pitch deck and so forth. And I remember one of your mentors was saying that you have to know what, it sounds simple, but you need to know what the venture capitalist wants. You get to give them what they want, not what you think they want. And so do you have any advice as far as, you know, obviously, Craig, if you take the course, you know, I think you'll get a lot of bang for your buck, but for a person like him right now, how would you steer him?
Yeah. Well, so some of it is what I think when you started with the question, like, what is it investors want to know? That's, you know, team, what problem are you solving? You know, if you're not solving a problem that someone will pay for, you don't really have anything. So that's where you always start these pitch decks is, here's the problem I'm solving. And then you have to give them some proof that it's not just what you think is the problem, but you've actually spoken to people in the marketplace and they've told you it's a huge problem. And if you could solve it, they would be willing to pay money. So that's, you know, you really have to do all this background stuff. You can't just throw together a pitch deck. Because it won't have the right content. And, you know, investors see like hundreds, if not of thousands of pitch decks every year, and they invest in maybe 2% of what they see, maybe 1%. So if you're not right on target, it's not going to be relevant. Where to look? You know, I'd go on the internet and look at places like SlideShare has a bunch of pitch decks on it. Not much in life sciences, but that would be a place to start. And just there's some of the VCs have sort of models of what they'd like to see, and one that comes to mind is Canaan Partners, CANAAN, in the Bay Area in the Silicon Valley. I believe they've got something up. And then Sequoia Capital, which is not a life science VC, although they occasionally will invest. They also have a format, not a format, but a list of topics they want to see covered. So those would be good places to start.
And I
I got a
remember,
question.
go ahead.
If I could just jump in here. Hey, Stephanie, with regards to the 1% and 2% of those deals that the VC are moving forward with, what's your experiences with, of those deals, how much of an IP presence, intellectual property presence, is there with regards to those deals? Is it a small amount or a large amount? I mean, is VCs looking for right away to have some sort of strategic positioning or IP involved at that time?
Absolutely. If you don't have IP in our business, you don't have anything. Now, that's not the same for digital health, so I don't know what piece of the business you're interested in. But therapeutics, devices, diagnostics, it's all about IP. So that's what we do. We create IP, and that's what investors invest in. So yeah, you got to get that buttoned up. And I have an entrepreneur right now who just did a big, well, I shouldn't say big, did a study. He's actually working on acne, but with the microbiome. And he did a clinical trial, and he got some really nice looking data. And while he's been doing this consumer product, for which I don't think there's any IP, his real passion is as a scientist. So he did this clinical trial, and now he's got stuff that people can look at and say, wow, this really does have a direct impact on preventing acne or curing acne. And so my advice to him was, go get it protected, like even with a quick provisional patent before you go talk to people. And then he'll have something. He now has something he didn't have before, which is credibility through a clinical trial, and then resulting IP.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's an important question. So thanks for bringing that out, Brian.
Yeah, and Stephanie, I remember you had a CEO as one of the mentors. He said something about he pitched. I don't know if they're angel investors or VC, but he goes, they kind of didn't say yes and didn't say no, and then like 6 months, a year went by, and they really were looking of, have you moved the ball in the last 6 months? They want to see that you're not still exactly where you were 6 months ago when you're pitching.
That's a good point to bring out as well. So investors want a relationship. They don't really want to, if you manage to get into their conference room in the old days, online, a meeting, and they never heard of you before, but somehow or other you got there through a connection, they'll look at it and, maybe they'll think about it. But what they really want is they want to get to know you. Because remember, I told you team is important. And they want to know that you deliver. So if you go into them and you say, look, I'm not looking for your money right now. I think it's too early, but I just wanted to let you know what I'm working on. And I'd like to stay in touch, because in 6 months, we're going to do X. And then I want to come back to you and tell you how it went. And then 6 months later, you did X, it hopefully came out okay. And you go back to them and you say, hey, I just wanted to report in on, this. We actually were able to get some really great results. So, if you do that a few times, you're building a relationship and you're building your credibility, and you're much more likely to get an investment than just walking in and saying, I need money.
Right. So when we get this world back turning the right way and we can go out, are you planning on having live meetings or mentor events in the future?
Man, I don't know what I'm planning at the moment. I'm really focused on doing this global course. I used to, Kelly, I don't know if you know this, I used to have a big program of events and seminars and a team-based class where people form teams around an idea, and then they had a big pitch night to investors and so on. A program with many aspects, but it's a different world right now, and I'm not sure how much it's going to go back. So at the moment, I'm just totally focused on this global class, building that network. That's going to make it more valuable to you, Kelly, as an alum, and more chances to engage. And then, for us to have global reach and bring our message out about how to do a startup, because I'm passionate about helping people be successful in startups in our life science medical world, where we can do real good. And I just want to point out that the 2 companies that have produced the first COVID vaccines were startups 10 years ago. I don't know if everyone knows that, but Moderna was a Boston startup. I know people who've invested in it, lucky them. And BioNTech was a Austrian startup, and then they were working on cancer until quite recently. Then hooked up with Pfizer and did this vaccine. So anyway, it's the startup mentality that says, we've never done an RNA vaccine, but hey, that would be better. Let's give it a shot. That's not going to happen in pharma. They're just into the way they used to do things or currently do things. And it's startups that change the world. So that's where I'm happy to be working.
Great. Well, Stephanie, I'm trying to be courteous of your time and everybody's time, but I wanted to, I think mission accomplished is introduce you to, I guess, the people in my circles, and then the people in my circles at Stephanie, and that I know there's a lot of people I'm getting texts that that this is awesome, that there's a lot of people excited to work with you moving forward. And but before I leave, is there any parting questions from the audience before we cut Stephanie loose?
No science. Don't ask me deep science. I'm an MBA.
All right.
Happy to take some questions if anyone has one.
Chris, you have to have a question. So I used to work with Chris, and so so we might be here a while because he is an inquisitive person.
Great quiz.
I'm a curious bug by nature. As we're talking, as you've been talking, it's been interesting, and I shot a couple messages off. But your presentation in regards to the life sciences versus tech and some of the other parts, and the convergence there of how VCs versus other types of investing is pretty different. Have you seen currently a shift towards specific type of technology healthcare convergences that have become like the nouveau, or the most hot topics of companies that are really going down the direction, whether it be on the biotech or the medical side?
Are you talking about investor companies or
Product company, both basically, VCs and what they're really looking towards. For instance, if you're bringing out a product into the bridging technology and cancer research, or bridging like in a biotech or something, is there a specific spaces that are really their ear is going to be caught immediately versus something else like in the diagnostic realm, or something that's just kind of like, yeah, that's great, but that was interesting 5 years ago, and maybe interesting if you have the IP and $100 million behind you. So
yeah, no, as you seem to know, the trends go in and out of favor. So what I see right now, aside from infectious disease, which was a stepchild for so many years, oh my God, no one wanted to touch it, and now now look where we are. So yes, infectious disease, immuno-oncology is still hot. Digital health in general is finally come into its own because of COVID. I mean, it was getting more and more investment and more popular, but boy, COVID really pushed it over the top. Gene therapy is, it's been through its cycle, but it's currently hot. So those are kind of, maybe cell therapy following on to that, which I'm hopeful for because I have a cell therapy diabetes company. Yeah, I'd say those are my top of mind things that are trending upward right now.
interesting. Yeah, it is pretty fascinating on stuff along those lines. And then one other question that goes to a little bit less, and I'm sure some of the folks that are on here that have been around, kind of the McKesson Cardinals and Medlines of the world have been very sluggish, antiquated, and have taken markets. And I believe there's a couple of different approaches that can knock them off their horse when it comes into global supply chain. Have there been any buzz or anything along the lines in your networks that you've seen someone going like, hey, if we see somebody come out with a bridging technology, supply chain, and medical that can do a global approach, i.e. bringing direct from Asian, European manufacturers into the US to really compete and hit those kind of megaliths. Is that something you've heard anything about, or is it just kind of almost not sexy enough for people to really look at?
Yeah, supply chain isn't that sexy. You're right. So no, I don't hear about it. You know, I hear about the next great therapy or
Sure.
yeah, and some of these other areas, CRISPR and gene therapy and I mean, the least sexy businesses are often the most profitable. And so there's nothing to say we shouldn't be working on that stuff, but it's sort of a different segment of the world.
Yeah, there's a reason why I asked, but I was curious to get your opinion. There is some technology and a convergence. I like to use that word convergence because there's a lot of stuff colliding right now, and over the next, I was saying 5 or 10 years, but I'm seeing on what I've looked at and globally as countries are starting to collaborate and their supplies are waning so quickly. You're seeing flattening of the supply chain. So that's why I was curious. And there's some really interesting stuff that I've had some conversations recently about. So I really appreciate your thoughts on it. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah.
All right. Well, Craig.
One more quick question. Tell us a little bit about your experience with the JP Morgan healthcare program that they do every year. Is that mostly focused on startup or mid-stage growth, right as they're starting to become commercialized or right after commercialization? What is your opinion on how the JP Morgan Healthcare Summit conference every year works together in taking startups and mid-stage growth to the next level?
So let me describe JP Morgan Week first, because that may help with the answer. JP Morgan used to be called Hambrick and Quist, and it's been through a number of iterations. But the main conference, which happens in San Francisco every year until this year, is an investment banking conference, and you can't get into it unless you're invited. And so what they do is they provide a platform for public companies to present where they're at, and a smaller number of private companies that they think are basically good investment banking prospects for them. So it's the attendees are Wall Street analysts and investors of various sorts, and some CEOs and certainly all the presenting companies, but we can't get into it. So what happened when it used to be that it was open, I went for 12 years while it was open, and then they changed their policy. So then a number of entities started side conferences. They said, well, the entire healthcare business world comes to San Francisco. So why don't we, now that these startups and earlier stage private companies can't get in, why don't we create some conferences that they'll pay for, and then they can do all the partnering and networking and so on. So they started different people started conferences on the side. And some of those are addressed to more mature companies. So there's one called Biopharm America, maybe. It's a biopharm conference.
We can't hear her.
Oh, yeah, I can't hear you. There you go.
I wonder if she accidentally pushed a mute button.
Oh, maybe. Let me.
Happen.
There you go.
How long
Yeah,
have I
you're
been
back.
off for?
Oh, about 30 seconds.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you for, I didn't,
Biopharma America was the last one we heard.
what was the last thing?
Biopharm America?
Oh, Biopharm America. Okay, so then there's this, there's a conference called the RESI Conference, Redefining Early Stage Investment, which is for earlier stage companies, and you still pay to go, but there are a lot of investors there, and they're more appropriate for you. And then there are other things you can go to, and there's a bunch of cocktail parties where you network, and there are things that pharma does, and there are things that attorneys do. So it's a huge event that attracts something like 10,000 people. And it really is the life science healthcare world that comes to one place on the business side, but it's not anything you can get into the main JP Morgan conference. Does that answer you, Craig?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I know people who have went. Like I said, I've been in the early and mid stage startup world since 2007. But now I'm starting to get into the more senior level realm, and I'm just trying to do my due diligence for more networking and opportunities. So thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. It's a great place to network. If it had been real, I would have been putting in 14-hour days, going to 3 to 5 parties every night to network and going to conferences, and I'd have some of my companies pitching at conferences and so on. But it was online, so it was not a networking event this year.
Well, Stephanie, I'm going to conclude the meeting. First of all, thank you for your time and also everybody that attended. I really appreciate it. I hope I'm getting some nice feedback and some text, and if I can ever help you, even though it's not recruiting related, please call me, email me. I'm sure Stephanie feels the same way. We're all one big community trying to help each other. So, and if you have any more questions, this WebEx will be sent out to everybody that registered, so you can have it. But if there's some deck that you wanted to see or need the brochure, I'm happy to send it to you. So, Stephanie, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kelly. It's nice to meet everybody, and hope some of you get interested in joining the class, which I think is a great opportunity.
All right. Y'all take care.
Bye.
All right.